Last week, I was at celebration of the AGC of California's 100 years, their centennial celebration. And they combined that celebration with their constructor awards. And one of my clients, Tykert, they got an award for a killer project that they built in the Bay Area. And it was really neat because when the award was announced, you could see the leaders, the executive leaders of the company, they had a table there and they got up and they started walking to the stage to pick up the award. And it would have been understandable if it was just the executive leaders representing the organization. But it was really cool because they also brought up the project manager and the young project engineer who was involved in building that project successfully. And they all got up on the stage as a team and they all took the credit together. They shared the credit. And that's a real testimony and a real example of what it means to be humble, is particularly as a leader, you're not trying to garner all the praise for yourself, but you're willing to spread it out and share it with your people.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership.
When I was a child, soccer, or as I knew it then, football, was my obsession. I remember my dad asking me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I immediately said a professional football player. And then he asked me right after that, well, what if that doesn't work out? And I said, I'm going to work at a petrol station. See, I was born in England, and so petrol station, same thing as a gas station, right? Well, I never did become a professional football player, and fortunately, for me at least, I'm not pumping gas at a petrol station. I was born in Bristol in the south of England, and because soccer or football was my obsession, one of my most clear memories from my youth was going to see our local third division team, Bristol Rovers, playing a match, standing in the stands. I was a little shorter than all of the adults there with my dad, one of those old sort of rickety soccer stadiums, watching this lower tier soccer team play. Bristol Rovers, they were kind of small potatoes, but fortunately I was not condemned to supporting a small time club because my dad was born in the north of England. Bristol was in the south of England, and he lived near a city famous for two things: music and soccer. The city, of course, is Liverpool, home of the Beatles and one of the world's soccer icons. That is Liverpool Football Club. In fact, during the 1980s, when I was a boy living in England, they were a major force in English and European football. They won 11 titles in that time in what is now known as the Premier League. So at that time, if you supported Liverpool, it's kind of like supporting the Patriots. But since that time, they haven't won the league since 1989, 1990, a drought of almost 30 years. Until now, when they have become, once again, a top-class club. And they began to rebuild the franchise in recent years with new ownership, a new manager, and new players. And now, without a doubt, they're one of the top 5 teams in the world, recently winning the Champions League and even the World Club Championship. So the fans in the stands can chant that they're not only champions of Europe, but they're champions of the world. But it's funny being in the Premier League and being in England. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter if you're champions of Europe and champions of the world if you're not Premier League champions. And that is the title that they are pursuing. Right now, Liverpool are in the midst of a historic run of success in terms of wins and losses. And what has enabled the team to perform at such a high level? I don't think it's just because that they have the money and the facilities and the talent. Many clubs have money, facilities, and talent. I think it has more to do with the culture of the team. And that starts with their manager, Jurgen Klopp. And it sort of filters all the way throughout the organization. And like soccer, construction is definitely a team sport. And as in soccer, you can have all the resources, technology, and experience, but if you don't have a positive team-oriented culture, it's going to hinder your success. Liverpool's culture was nicely summarized recently by a TV commentator during a game. And he said that Liverpool have 4 traits or characteristics as a team that really contribute to their success. And those 4 characteristics are: number 1, they're hungry; number 2, they're hardworking; number 3, they're humble; and number 4, they're happy. Hungry, hardworking, humble, and happy. I believe that those 4 traits are common to most great teams. And in this episode of Construction Genius, I'll describe each one of these traits and discuss how you can promote them in your construction company so that you too can build strong teams, and as a result of that, enjoy the success of building profitable projects. So let's start with this idea of hunger. What do we mean by hunger? Hunger is an interesting thing, isn't it? Because it's something that we experience pretty much on a daily basis from a physical point of view. So we're all familiar with what hunger is. It's a desire, or it's a lack. And in terms of Liverpool, the soccer club, they're hungry because they haven't won in a long time. So think of something that you really enjoy eating, just for a moment, that you haven't had for a long time. And when you begin to think about that, it creates a hunger or a desire in you that you might want to run out and fulfill. And hunger is extremely motivational. And that's why hunger is important. So a good question for you to ask yourself and folks in your construction company is, what is your motivation, or what is the hunger that is driving you? Because what hunger does is it brings focus to your efforts and your energy. And it causes you to look at available resources and get creative. So if your company is hungry to be excellent, or hungry to succeed, or hungry to get the next project, that hunger or that desire, it drives you. And how is hunger practically expressed? Well, it's practically expressed, number 1, in dedication. If you're hungry, you dedicate your efforts to satiating that hunger. It's also seen in initiative. In other words, you'll move forward and you'll seek to fulfill that hunger, and you'll persist in that initiative until that hunger is met. And it also results in ingenuity. You're going to figure out, if you're hungry for something, you're going to figure out how to satiate that particular desire. And so if you want to be the best, if you want to build a successful company, if your team wants to build profitable projects and deliver real value to your customers, you're going to take the initiative, you're going to be ingenious, and you're going to dedicate yourself to fulfilling that hunger. And so think about this, just as we wrap up this point on hunger. What is it that motivates you? If you think about in terms of sports, what motivates sports teams? Well, winning obviously is a great motivation. Recognition that comes from the winning. Think about being a professional athlete and the recognition that you receive when you succeed. Money is obviously a part of it. Pride, a sense of accomplishment and achievement. Even on a team, there's that sense of family that really motivates a lot of people. That's why people love being on teams, because there's a sense of belonging and camaraderie. And you really want to be cultivating that in your construction company. And so search yourself and ask your people and really determine what is it that is motivating you. And the best companies, I believe, are similar to sports teams in that they're hungry for wins. They're hungry for recognition. Of course, they want to make money. They want to have a sense of pride and accomplishment and achievement. And the best companies have that sense of family, of camaraderie that characterizes the best sports teams as well. And the final thing about this idea of hunger is, one of the things that people are really hungry for is this idea of mastery. And that's one thing that professional athletes enjoy, because if you're going to be a professional athlete and play at the highest level, you have to master your craft. And I think that's something that you need to focus on as well, is cultivating in yourself and in your people a hunger to really excel and be good at what you do. So it's one thing to be hungry, but it's another thing to put in the hard work. And that's the second trait of successful teams that we want to take a look at. Because you see, hunger is universal, but hard work is not. There's an interesting proverb. It says this: no matter how much you want, laziness won't help a bit, but hard work will reward you with more than enough. That's taken from the book of Proverbs in the Old Testament. By the way, I'll give you a quick tip here. One of the things I like about the book of Proverbs is that there's 31 chapters that make up the book of Proverbs. You can read a proverb a day every week, every month rather. All you need to do is look at the calendar. Like today when I'm recording this, it's February 6th. So if you wanted to go through the Proverbs on a regular basis, you just pick up the Old Testament and read Proverbs 6. Free tip right there. Okay, back to the show. Let's talk about being hardworking. Okay, now to this idea of hard work, I want to really add the idea and the qualifier of intelligent hard work. You know, there's that old cliche, don't work harder, work smarter. I like to combine those two things, work smarter and harder. Intelligent hard work is really where you want to be focused on. And another thing that you always want to keep in mind as a leader, and I've been thinking about this quite a lot, both in terms of my parenting and just in all the organizations I'm involved in and in my leadership, is people are looking at you all the time. Your folks are looking at you and they are following your example. So when I'm talking about having hunger and hard work and being humble and being happy, if you're not reflecting those traits yourself, there's no way that your people will be able to. If you're the leader of your construction company, you must take complete responsibility for manifesting those traits if you expect your people to manifest them as well. So what is hard work? What is the hard work of a construction professional? Well, we could say many things about this, but I'd just like to make a few points. Number one, you have to get clarity and understanding about the job that you're building. Put your arms around the job and understand what you're building in terms of the technical aspects of the build. Number two, you have to do the hard work of looking at the project from your customer's perspective. Because ultimately in construction, you are providing a product and a service, and that product or service you provide in exchange for money from those that you serve, your customers in other words. And so it behooves you to look at the project from your customer's perspective and do the hard work of putting yourself in the other person's shoes, asking what are they looking to get out of this project, what are their requirements, what constitutes a good experience for them. And that's not always easy to do, to be able to look at a project from your customer's perspective. But if you're able to do that, if you do that kind of hard work, it will give you insights that can really help you to deliver your products and services in such a way that meet the customer's needs. And then you also have to do the hard work. And this is particularly for folks who are perhaps project managers or estimators or even superintendents. You have to do the hard work of looking at the project that you're building from your company's perspective. How does your company view this project? How do they view it in terms of how it fits into the overall strategic plan of the organization? Where does the project sit in relationship to other projects? And how does it relate to those other projects in terms of how resources will be applied? Because sometimes in a construction company, and you understand this, one project does not necessarily get the same level of attention and resources as another project for whatever reason. And when you're on the project that perhaps isn't the highest priority, it can at times get a little bit discouraging. But it's your job to do the hard work of understanding where the project fits in the bigger picture, so that regardless of whether it's an A1 priority or an A2 priority project, you understand how it fits. And as a result of that, you can be content and focused in how you execute the project. And along those lines, it's very important for the leaders of the organizations to communicate down the chain where each project sits, and to really assure your people that even if one particular project isn't necessarily getting all of the resources all of the time in the way that everyone involved in that project would like, it doesn't mean that necessarily the project manager or the superintendent or the estimator is being judged solely on the performance of that project. Because sometimes it's hard for folks to perform at the highest level if all the resources aren't there for them. And the folks on the project need to understand that. So you have to do the hard work of getting clarity and understanding about the job that you're building from those three perspectives. Number two, you have to do the hard work of communication. Recently, I was working with one of my clients, and it was a great meeting. And I really encourage you to do a meeting like this, because what they did is they got their estimators in the room, they got their project managers and project engineers, and they got their superintendents and their foreman in the room. Now, everyone wasn't in the room, but they got a sampling from these different groups. And then the leaders of those different groups, they sat in on the meeting as well. And what we discussed was, how is it that the three areas of the company, right? The project group, the field group with the supers and the foreman, and then the estimators, how is it that we could work together more effectively? And the one thing that came across again and again and again was, we need to communicate more effectively across the various divisions and the various parts of the company. And some real practical feedback was given, for instance, to the estimators, the project managers, and particularly the folks in the field, the foremen and the supers. They were telling the estimators, hey guys, come out into the field on the projects that you've bid. Get your boots muddy and see what's going on as we're building those projects, because that information can help you as you're estimating work in the future. In terms of the field, the feedback that the estimators were giving to the field was, make sure that you give us the right data or clear data. Make sure that you report the information from the field back up to the estimators so we can have an understanding of how accurate we are in our estimates and adjust accordingly. And then the field was also communicating with the PMs in light of scheduling and just asking them, make sure that when you're scheduling various trades to come out to the job site, try your best not to stack the trades. I'm giving you this example because the main issue that came up was the importance of communication. And you really have to do the hard work of communication if you're going to be successful as a construction company. Another aspect of hard work is you must do the hard work of being competent. And so think about this. What's harder and more stressful? Firefighting or fire prevention, right? I'm no expert, but I would guess firefighting is more stressful and harder work. And unfortunately, in construction, we tend to spend a lot of time firefighting and not enough time fire preventing. And the reason why that happens is because either a lack of competence or a lack of attention to detail. And as a result of that, a lot of hard work is generated, but some of that hard work could have been avoided, that hard work of firefighting, if the hard work of fire prevention had taken place before that. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a young construction professional, and she's involved in dispatch, helping to figure out how to improve her job performance. And after thinking about the outcomes that she needed to achieve as someone in dispatch and the tasks that led to achieving those outcomes, she committed to spending a total of 30 minutes a day chatting with her foreman to make sure that they have communicated and she has accurately understood all that they need for the day's work, so that she can dispatch those resources and that equipment to the job site in such a way that they have everything that they need just to ball out for the whole day. And I asked her what the impact of that proactivity, that fire prevention would be, and she said it would really help to reduce her stress. And so she committed to that upfront work in order to prevent the fires that often occur as a result of that lack of communication. So make sure that your team is doing all of the hard work necessary in order to be successful. Because if you're hungry and you're working hard, it's going to help you achieve your project goals. Now, let's move on. We've talked about hunger and hard work. Now let's look at humility. This is really interesting. What do we mean by humility? When I think of humility, I mean the opposite of being conceited, the opposite of being vain. It's an appropriate view of yourself. And I think if you look at the very best athletes, you never get a sense that they've ever arrived, or they don't project that sense. I'm the man and there's nothing that I can do to improve. Now, they have a great deal of confidence, and sometimes that can be interpreted as cockiness or arrogance, but you never get the sense, and they never tell you that they've arrived. They're always working on their craft. There's always room for improvement, and they have lots to learn from other people. And the very best construction executives are exactly like this. They've never arrived. There's always room for improvement. They've always got something to learn. And why is humility important? Well, life is full of ups and downs. The ups may be of your doing, but they may not be. And when things are going really well, it can give you a sense of entitlement at times, or a sense of nothing is ever going to change. It's always going to go this way. But you know, and I know that life isn't like that. With the ups comes the downs, and those downs can be dispiriting because you never really know how long they're going to last. And you think, man, I've got this hunger, I've put in all the hard work, and yet there's this failure, or I'm not as profitable as I would like to be. And that can get discouraging. And that's why humility is so important, because when you're up, you don't want to get too up. And when you're down, you don't want to get too discouraged and beat yourself up. And I really believe that people who are truly humble have a sort of a steady, even keel about them in their lives. And so how is humility practically expressed? Well, number one, you show up every day. You just show up every day and you put in the work. Number two, you commit to supporting other people. Number three, and right along with that, there's a real lack of selfishness. It's not all about you. You're there to support and help others because, again, construction is a team sport. Number four, you don't make it all about you. I'll give you an example. The 49ers had a really good season this year, losing tragically in the Super Bowl, but nevertheless, they did really well in the playoffs. And in the NFC Championship, Jimmy G, their quarterback, only threw the ball 8 times. And people kept asking him, Jimmy, don't you wish you would have thrown it more than 8 times? And Jimmy was like, no, man, I don't care, because the Niners were running the ball so well, he didn't have to throw it. He didn't make it all about him. He was just interested in winning. And that's a real expression of humility. Another way to express humility, number 6, is to admit mistakes quickly. How long does it take you to say, hey, guys, I blew it, right? The longer it takes, the more the pain will increase. So let me encourage you, when you make a mistake, admit it as quickly as possible. Number 7, take responsibility and spread the credit. It's really interesting. Take responsibility and spread the credit. Last week, I was at celebration of the AGC of California's 100 years, their centennial celebration. And they combined that celebration with their constructor awards. And one of my clients, Tykert, they got an award for a killer project that they built in the Bay Area. And it was really neat because when the award was announced, you could see the leaders, the executive leaders of the company, they had a table there and they got up and they started walking to the stage to pick up the award. And it would have been understandable if it was just the executive leaders representing the organization. But it was really cool because they also brought up the project manager and the young project engineer who was involved in building that project successfully. And they all got up on the stage as a team and they all took the credit together. They shared the credit. And that's a real testimony and a real example of what it means to be humble, is particularly as a leader, you're not trying to garner all the praise for yourself, but you're willing to spread it out and share it with your people. Okay, so we've discussed being hungry, we've discussed being hardworking, we've discussed humility. Now, let's talk about being happy. Effective, strong teams are happy teams. And what is happiness? Happiness is an idea of well-being, of joy, of contentment, I think contentment is something that we can really cultivate in our lives. What does it mean to be content? It means to be okay with the situation that you're in. The situation may not be ideal, but you're not going to lose your mind over adverse situations. You can be content when things are going well. Again, you don't get too high. And when things are going badly, you don't get too low. You're just okay with the circumstance that you're in. And how is unhappiness manifested? It's manifested in complaining, in grumbling, in self-pity. And why is it that people aren't happy? Well, I believe that one of the reasons why people aren't happy is they aren't good at anything. You think about it in our culture many times. You think about how excellent our entertainment industry is, for instance, the millions of dollars that go into producing a movie, or the excellence of the athletic endeavors and sports teams that we watch. We spend a lot of time watching other people be excellent, and yet we don't take the time to cultivate excellence within ourselves, in our vocations, or in our hobbies, or in our relationships. And as a result of that, we struggle in those things, and it causes a great deal of unhappiness. Another reason why people aren't happy is they just do things that they know are wrong, or they don't do things they know are right. And intertwined in all of that, they don't put enough effort and energy into maintaining good relationships with those who are most important to them, both at work and at home. So how can you cultivate happiness on a regular basis? Well, you need to be able to get small wins under your belt, small wins. And one of the ways to do that is to consistently commit in your construction company to communication. Communication on a daily, weekly, and monthly basis. And really embrace the process of construction. One of my clients well said, construction it sucks, but it's fun. And I know I've mentioned that before on the podcast, and that's kind of like life, isn't it? Life sucks, but it's fun. And you've got to really be able to embrace that and pay attention to the process, understanding that one day doesn't sum up your whole life, and 1 week doesn't sum up the success of a project, but you can make incremental steps to achieving your project goals day by day, week by week, and month by month. And I'd like to say this: if you are combining hard work, hunger, and humility, you are going to be a happy person, and you're going to be able to build happy teams. Because if you're hungry and you don't work hard, you won't be happy. You'll just starve. If you're hungry and you do work hard, but you lack humility, you'll never be happy, and you'll never be able to create a happy team. There'll be always something missing there. And that's why it's so important to have those 4 traits: hard work, hunger, humility, and then to cultivate that happiness. And it's interesting, if you think about Liverpool right now, and I think particularly about that idea of happiness, one of the objections I might come up with is just to say, it's easy for Liverpool to be happy because they're winning. Of course they're happy. But I'd like to say that winning, which creates happiness, is because they're cultivating those other 3 aspects of hunger, hard work, and humility. And again, you might think, well, Liverpool, they have the resources, they have the great players, and look at construction, right? Maybe I don't have unlimited resources and the talent is not that great. How am I supposed to create and cultivate those great teams? Let me just say this. It doesn't necessarily make a great team when you have resources and the best talent. We all know really talented people in construction who are bad team members. So don't think about your lack of resources. And if you do have people who don't necessarily have all of the talent, think about how you can cultivate that talent and develop them. Focus in on maximizing the resources that are available to you. So as I'm recording this podcast in early 2020, Liverpool is on the verge of winning the Premier League title. And it'll be the first time again since 1989, 1990. And they are undefeated. They're top of the table. And I got to say, as a Liverpool fan, I'm pretty excited. Think about your next steps. Think particularly about the atmosphere of the teams in your organization. Are they hungry? One way to develop hunger within your organization is to set goals, either for the company or for the project, that stretch folks, but are attainable. And to be an example yourself of someone who diligently pursues those goals. And that's where being hardworking comes in. I encourage you, do the hard work of holding each other accountable, particularly for your communication. Do the hard work of not making assumptions about people and situations, but doing the hard work of finding out the truth. Do the hard work of communication up and down the chain of command. I think this is critical. Folks in executive positions, you should have an open door policy to people in the field for them to be able to come and tell you like it really is. And folks in the field communicating up and down the chain of command, as you go into those executive situations and you're talking to the people who are in the office all the time, you've got to understand that sometimes there's a bigger picture than just what's going on your project. And so while you may have concerns that are legitimate, you've got to be able to fit those concerns into the bigger picture. One of the ways to be hardworking as well, make sure as an executive you're blocking out time for those high leverage tasks that you can easily get distracted from. In terms of being humble, first thing you can do, really, just practically, I mentioned it already, is to admit mistakes quickly. The quicker you can admit the mistake, the quicker you can move on. Always be asking yourself, how can I get better? Don't be content with where you're at, even though you could probably cruise for the next 10 years because you're competent and you really know your business. Look to really improve your skills in whatever areas you may be lacking, or the areas where if you did improve, it would have the biggest positive impact. In terms of humility, take that example that I shared with you and make sure that you are spreading the credit. Make sure that you are recognizing people in your organization, both publicly and privately. And as far as being happy, it's pretty simple. Number one, stop doing stuff that you shouldn't be doing, whatever that might be, right? Start doing stuff that you know that you should. And stop complaining if things aren't perfect. This is life. Things are never perfect, right? Have the conversations you need to have with the people in your organization and be content on making incremental progress towards executing your projects in the most profitable way possible. My name is Eric Anderton. I really appreciate you listening to the show today, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it helpful. Please feel free to give me feedback on this show. You can contact me on my website, ericanderton.com. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter. And I tell you, I've taken the big step. I got a Facebook account. I had deleted Facebook for a long time, but one of the people who does work for me, he really encouraged me to set up a Facebook account to promote the podcast. So you can now find the podcast promoted on Facebook. So check it out there as well. Send me a friend request. I may not respond, but I'll get the message eventually. Again, this is Eric Anderton. Give us that review on Apple, Google, or wherever you might get your podcasts. I've got 5-star reviews all over the Apple podcast. So I really appreciate that. And if you think we've earned it, give us that 5-star review. Give us a written review as well. Share the episode with other people in the construction industry. And I do wish you a terrific week. Thanks for listening.
This is Eric Anderton, and you're listening to Construction Genius, a leadership masterclass. Thomas Edison said that genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. If you're a construction leader, you know all about the perspiration, and this show is all about the 1% inspiration that you can add to your hard work to help you to improve your leadership.